Welcome back. We have a lot to catch up on. It's been quite the season. So I'll try to go kind of fast and condense everything. Don't want to make an episode that's too long. So what I decided is I lost in the second round of playoffs again. So I went into it and we kept having that plan to have all those draft picks. But last year I really wanted to go super all in. So I traded for the best goalie in the league from that Sault Ste. Marie team. Gave up like 3 or 4 seconds. And I decided to go all in, but I still lost in the second round. So what happened is I did get him back though for his 20-year-old season. Because goalies usually get backlogged, and even that's one position. Even if they're drafted decently high, you still get him back. And he was like a fifth-round pick or something in the AHL, sixth-rounder. So I got him back for his 20-year-old season. I ended up trading him, but so I decided I had to recoup all those picks, and I still wanted to go ahead with the plan and have all those second and third round extra picks. So I did a fire sale and I traded a ton of guys. So I actually traded my 7 highest rated players this season and recouped all those picks. And going ahead with the plan again, we have the 4 second rounders and the 4 third rounders, and then multiple fourths, multiple fifths, and multiple sixths. So we have a crazy stacked draft class coming up. I want to keep it realistic where you can't trade first rounds in real life, so I want to try and collect all the second rounders. So I got all that because I traded, like I just said, all the best players. We still left a decent cup board though, because we had such good depth. That was the big reason why we did this. And the whole plan was to draft all those guys this upcoming draft. So if you look at the team, I trade everybody that was like 19 and wasn't going to be back next season, or in the 20-year-old OAs. I did keep some really solid players. I kept Miranda, who's been a really solid 68 game guy the last 2 seasons and is at a point a game this season. Was on the second line. Really, really good ratings. Like, one of the best skaters I've had, and has the profile where he's going to be a really good player next season as a 20-year-old. So I held on to him, and then I held on to my really good foreign. I had 2 really good foreign centers. One was a Swedish guy, and then this guy. They were first and second liners. So I traded the good 19-year-old Swedish guy because he won't be back next year. I traded him for like a third and a fourth just recently, and I moved this guy up to the first line. This guy is going to be a beast next season. He's been appointed guy this season. He made World Juniors for Czechoslovakia as a 18-year-old. I'm really excited about him. He actually learned left wing in Europe too, which is cool. And then I have a bunch of 18-year-olds, as you can see. So I got him as an 18-year-old. I just realized all 4 centers are your team, which is crazy. So they're all back next year. So they're going to play, because you can only roster 4 16-year-olds. So next season when I draft all those guys, they're going to be almost all junior A. So I'll have the 4 19-year-old centers and still have a really good team next year because a lot of like older players. And it's just really cool. I made all those trades, opened up spots for all these guys. Like Blackbird was in junior A, and Glasgow was like a sixth center at the start of the year, and so the only guy that really would have started is like Lezak and Holowick. So it opened up a lot of roster spots. Some really solid players. These guys that are 18 now, if you can remember, a couple years ago I talked about in the draft. I tried to draft all the best skaters that draft. So these guys were all the guys that were like 5'10", 170, and had like 12, 11 speed. So my team's a really good skating team because that's the draft I really focused on speed and agility and all that stuff. So that's why I got like Miranda and a bunch of really good skaters in that draft. I got McLeod, who's one of the best players in that draft. He's 18, and he actually was, I think, my scout had him as like the 4th best player in the draft, and I got him in like the 3rd round. It's a crazy draft. Like as a current, he had just had really scout loved his potential, or his currents, and his OSA is really high, and he fell to the 3rd round somehow. So he's actually one of my favorite players. So I got McLeod, was a shutdown defensive guy. Miranda's still really good. Bunch of 18-year-old centers who are solid. This guy's just like 11 rated and everything. He'll be a good 19-year-old next year in the 4th line. This guy's pretty solid too. He's a guy that all these guys just didn't have spots. So I'm really happy we got an opportunity to play him. This is my first round pick this season. Vinny Wilden. He was actually the 2nd rated player in the draft. The entire draft, my scout said. He was the only 1-star in the draft other than the first overall pick. So he's a guy my scout really liked too. Not super high end ceiling, just a really solid, like every single category looks the same. So he's a guy that'll be like 12, 13 in like everything. Reminds me of a bunch of wingers I've had in the past. Kind of like Dodson, actually. Dodson, I got back. He's an 18-year-old, good leadership, so I made him alternate captain there next to Miranda. Another guy who's going to be a beast next season is 19-year-old. So that first line will be really good next year with Dodson, Miranda, and Lezak. So that'll be cool. So I should be able to trade a bunch of those 19-year-olds at the deadline next season and then pick up, hopefully, maybe if I trade Miranda and Dodson, pick up like an elite first round rookie 16-year-old to team with all those second and third round picks I have. So it'll probably be hard to find that like superstar player in the second and third rounds, even though I have all those second, third rounders. I'm talking about like those, top 5 talents. So hopefully maybe I can turn Miranda and Dodson or something like that into those guys. Dodson's actually younger than Miranda. Miranda will be an OA next season, so I'd potentially have Dodson for another 2 years because he didn't get drafted. So he's a really good player. And then, yeah, I really like this 5'9", 165 guy I drafted. He was 5'9", 160 when I drafted him, actually, I think. And he's growing a little bit, but he's been a really solid firecracker. I've tried to teach him left and right wing this year, and he's kind of played all over. We've got a little bit of a lack of depth since we traded so many forwards and didn't really trade them for players, just traded them for draft picks. I just called Ronald up, another solid second-year guy. He's an American guy who's actually looks pretty solid too, so he should be around a few years. Dennis, another guy that would have never played. He was like my 16th rated forward at the start of the year, but since I traded like 5, he's worked his way up into like a third line starter. And another guy will be 19 next year, good skater. Another one of those guys from that same draft class I keep talking about. Picked like 4 or 5 forwards in those mid rounds that had really good skating. So he's another guy, 12 speed, 15 balance, good offensive game. So just a really cool opportunity to get all those guys time in the OHL that normally wouldn't have been signed. Pretty much, yeah, Dennis, Glasgow, Blackbird, Hollowick, Hollett all probably wouldn't have played in the OHL this season if I didn't make those trades. And so, yeah, they're all 18 and just really loaded with 18-year-olds this draft. Pretty much because I don't have any like 17, 16-year-olds really. I knew I was going to do this draft strategy for a couple of years, so I tried to not really get anyone in the system the years before and get like those guys blocked because I figured I'd have like all kind of the same age, those 2013 guys. So I pretty much only have like the first and second round picks from the year 2 years above that. So any 17, 16-year-olds on this team. So I got the first round pick Wildmer, third round pick Daly, and then I got the first round pick from the year before Beaver. So he's a second year guy, and he's really good. He's another guy I could probably trade for a first round pick next year at the deadline just to get younger. Even though he's really good, he just won't have anyone really his age. So he's a guy that I could probably trade next year at the deadline and get like a first round pick rookie if I want to. I kind of want to keep him around though because he's a hometown guy. He's a Barrie boy. And yeah, so that's the offense. The defense. Oh yeah, the big trade I made was I keep talking about how I trade all the best players. I'll show you in a minute. The big one was the only real stud player I got back was I gave up like 3 top level 19, 20-year-olds, and I gave them all up for Reese. So I decided. Here, I'll talk about this now. It's a cool one. So Sarnia, I knew in the preseason was gonna be really good. They had been really bad the last couple seasons. If you look at their records here, they had 11 and 50. So they pretty much a 500 season and they went 11-50 and were just terrible at the first pick. And then 26-35. So they had 2 really bad years. And I knew they were going to be solid going into this year because they finally got a really good guy. They took this guy really high in the draft. I think he went like 10th, but he was like the best player in the draft, and he's developed like a beast. So he had a really good season. He had 20 goals as a rookie and 50 points, and then last year he had 30 goals and 30 assists. And I knew he was going to be a stud for 2 more seasons. So they had him, and then they had like the top import pick, who they got this elite 17, 18-year-old winger for. And so I knew, and then they had the first pick that year. They went 11 and 50, and they got this stud 17-year-old. So that was the year after the center. So they had that center of the year. They had like the 10th pick, and then the 11 and 50 year they took this guy. And this guy's an absolute monster. He's going to be around 2 more years and give me a really high pick. So I decided I kind of want to make it realistic. So I decided since they were going to be finally pretty good and they had a lot of talent. They had this guy too who's developed like crazy. I've never seen like a third round pick really get this good this early. So this guy's like got some crazy potential ratings, hidden potential ratings or something. So I knew they had a 2 really good wingers and a good center that were like 17. So I decided it'd be really cool to trade them if I'm going to pick a team to trade a bunch of my good players to, be them to make them really good. And it kind of worked out. They're 28 and 11. So they didn't have a top goalie. So I decided it's kind of stupid. I think I added the ratings a bit. I don't know why. It's like the best player on their team. They have in junior A right now. Something to do with the OAs being screwed up. So I'll have to edit that and help fix that for them. But I traded them my elite goalie, Howe. That's the guy I went all in for last year from Sault Ste. Marie and gave up like tons of second round picks for. So I traded Howe, and then that's how I got that elite 16-year-old goalie back because they just had like a solid 19-year-old goalie who's like 10 rate and everything. So I traded them. That guy was 14 and everything. So that was really realistic. Trade him like an elite 20-year-old. They have this really good young 17-year-old too. So that's another reason I thought it'd be kind of realistic to trade for like the top 5 pick rookie goalie because they had this guy too who's gonna be a future starter for like 2 or 3 years. So that was a good trade. And then, so anyways, to get that rookie top 5 pick, I thought I'd have to give up a ton. So to make it a really cool, like real life looking trade, I gave up Zadkov, my first line winger, who was actually an NHL pick. And I gave up him, the goalie, and I gave up Giangelo, who's like my best player. He's an absolute monster, one of my favorite players I've ever drafted. Thought it'd be fair to get him to a winning team for his last year because I was kind of tanking it a little bit. And I just figured he kind of like played with those really superstar players for a couple years, Brenneman and all that, and he didn't really want to have another year to rebuild, so might as well he's had 3 straight second round exits too, so I want to give him a chance to win a championship. And then on top of that, they had this really good Swedish guy they got too, first line center. And so before the year started, actually, these guys I all traded like halfway through the year. This guy actually traded before the year. If you remember him, he was my 6'5", 170 first round pick way back. And last year he was actually on the first line with Bear and Kozlovsky when I had Brennan in the second line. So I decided another guy who was 19, I was kind of tanking and thought it'd be only fair to trade him to a winner. Played with like the 2 best players in the league last year. He'd want to go to a winning team. So I traded him to Sarnia, and I got 2 seconds and a third for him. And so that's how I started, and a 10th and a 12th. So that's how I started recruiting all my draft picks. That was the main trade to start it off, and then I got that elite goalie for all those other guys. So if you look at their roster, it's hilarious. The number 1 goalie, Howe, I'll fix that in a second here. He'll be their starting goalie. And then I traded them Giangelo. I traded them, for some reason, I think since they're just tired, they're not on their roster right now, but Wall is the 15 rated center I got them. And then Zatkov's actually like their first line winger. He's just resting right now, I think, but he's like a 12, 13 rated. So he's like that first line left winger, I think. And then they have those 3 elite centers. So they got the Swedish guy, the guy I traded them, that like future former top 10 pick I said was like the best player from that draft. And then I traded them, and on the one I didn't mention is I actually traded them another trade. I gave them Smiley, and I thought it'd be fair to get 3rd, 4th, and 5th because he's only an OA. I could have maybe got 2nd, but I had so many seconds already. I want to make it realistic. OAs usually don't go for more than like 2nd or 3rd round picks, even the best one. So he's actually my team captain and was really good and 2nd team all-star in the league last year. Really good 13, 14 rated stay-at-home guy. So I decided to trade him for like a 3rd and a 4th, just get some more. Just like might as well just trade all the guys that aren't going to be back next year. And so I really loaded up Sarnia and took them from like a solid team to like a championship contender. So I thought that'd be really cool, them to go all in. And if I was going to kind of steal a bunch of draft picks from a team, I figured it'd be only fair to kind of make it realistic and make it a team that was going to be going all in. And they weren't going to be super high picks anyways. So that was I figured was just a really realistic scenario. And then that wasn't it. So I traded them like those, like almost 5 guys. And then on top of that, I looked at their league, and Owen Sound was actually the best team. They were like 20-3 at the time. So then I traded them. My pretty much best player was Zampero. He was my first line winger. If you remember, back in the day, he was the guy that had the 4.5 star potential from my scout, and then the OSA only had him on a 1.5. So my scout looked like he was right on that, and he was a really good player. Like he had a point a game all season and a +30, playing on with Brenneman on that second line. And he was the first line guy this year, just an absolute stud. 6'5", 210 now. He was 6'2", 186 when I drafted him, so he's developed like crazy. And anyways, he was another guy that was just not going to be back next year because he was an NHL pick, 3rd round pick, and he was a guy. So I traded him, and I gave him a nice, solid 19-year-old defenseman, par, and then I gave him a bunch of late round picks I wasn't really going to use. And I got a 2nd round pick and a really good 18-year-old goalie. I screwed up. I thought he was 17 when I traded for him. Doesn't matter. So I was a little bit light on the left side, so I decided I would get. I had so many draft picks. I figured might as well get 1 or 2 young players that were going to be pretty good. So they actually led up this guy who's really solid, and he's going to be a really good offensive player next year. He had 14 speed. He's a guy that I just liked his game with his big shot and his good passing or whatever. So I liked his profile. And then another trade I made to them is I just traded them my first line center I was just talking about. He had 71 points in 38 games. Just traded him like yesterday. He only has 1 game with them. He was my first line center. So this year started out, it was actually him and Zampero in that first line together, I think with Zatkov. And so Zatkov traded Sarnia, and then the right winger and the center I traded to Owen Sound. So I actually traded maybe my 8 best players. The entire first line I traded, and then Giangelo and then Smiley were the 2 first line defenders, both on Sarnia now. And so Holmgren was just tearing it up. He made Team Sweden the World Juniors. He was just a crazy good defensive player, but just another guy. I thought I'd make a realistic trade here, and I only traded him for a 2nd and a 3rd, just because he was like the league's leading scorer. I thought you'd for sure get a 2nd and 3rd for him in real life. Carly could trade him for a bit more, but again, OA, a guy that's 19-year-old Euro and only has like a month or 2 left on a loan, won't be back as an OA. I just figured it would be fair to get a 2nd and 3rd rounder for him. So I traded. I made all those trades, and then so that's the big rundown there to finally catch you guys up. So as you can see, we've really opened up a lot. Like Miranda and Dodson, Lezak are all the 2nd line guys, and then it really opened up a lot of spots for defenders. So I got to sign a bunch of my really good 18-year-old mid-round picks. Like this guy I took a couple years ago. I really liked how he developed. So that gave me an opportunity to roster him for the rest of the season. Since I traded all my OAs, I actually had a bunch of OA spots open. So I went back and I never expected that this guy's an OA. He was playing in the SJHL, whatever that is. Um, but I realized I had two OA spots open because I traded that defenseman and the center and all that. So I I went back from my team history and I was like, oh, this guy's just kicking around some really low level leagues. He wasn't good enough for the like ECHL. So he was 6'6", 222. I really liked him. He was 6'5", 200 when I drafted him way back. Or sorry, 6'5", 180 when I drafted him way back in the day. And never really developed, but I thought it'd be cool to bring a like an old school Barrie Colts guy back with some high like 6'6" big frame, and might as well just play out the year and be a solid defender because I had a ton of injuries on defense. I had these two guys out and a couple more, so I thought that'd be fair. And he's 11 rated, so it's not too bad. So I thought that'd be another cool move to make. Paquette's really developed. Big reason I traded Giangelo was because Paquette is an incredible offensive player. That his first year in the OHL, actually, I just was so loaded on D, and his defense wasn't very good, even though his offense was really good. His defense rating's really low. I had a really good like that 6'6" guy was 19 last year, and Giangelo and that captain Smiley I traded. So I had a lot of defensemen last year that were older, so didn't really have a spot for Paquette until this year. So he dominated Junior A for a couple years. Had some really solid seasons. I wouldn't say dominated, actually. Played as a 16, 17-year-old there in the OJHL. And so yeah, he's finally like the number one defenseman now. And then I have this really good American that I really like, who also I didn't want to roster till this season. He was only like a 5-6 rated in a lot of this defensive stuff when he was drafted, and just couldn't play defense in OHL level for a bunch of years. But he's finally at least able to be on the ice now and not be a huge defensive liability. And he's a wicked offensive player with some good, decent skating ratings and really good offensive read. So he's another guy that opened up a big spot for this year and turned into started the year as like the sixth defenseman. Now he's like the first line left defenseman. So him and Paquette, actually, or second line, just Paquette and him are both offensive guys, so I separated them. But so I got Stewart now with that big 6'6" guy, and Paquette with the that's the other guy I didn't show you is the rookie. I really like this rookie. He was my second round pick. He really good current ratings on defense. He had really high stick checking and really good strength and had a good shot. So he's another guy I think will get really good in a couple years. Big body. He's gonna be like 6'2", 230, and develop into like a really good hitting physical defender there. So I liked his game a lot. So I drafted him in the second round. I had good leadership too, 10. So he's another guy that that's opened up a lot of ice time for. I didn't even have him signed at the start of the year, but then I started trading all those guys. And gave me an opportunity to sign him, and now he's actually my second line left defender there. So I really just kind of gone over all that now. And I didn't really talk about Duquette. That's the other guy I wanted to mention. He's a guy drafted in the second round back in the day. He was a backup. So he's actually playing better than Howe this year, surprisingly. That really good goalie I traded to Sarnia. Howe was actually having a bit of a down year. Duquette wasn't playing great, but he was actually playing a little bit better than the Howe. So I decided it was time to make that move, and I picked up this elite 16-year-old who is a 5-star potential. So out of all those trades, this is the only kind of like elite young guy I got back, other than the draft picks. I just really want to focus on getting all those draft picks, and so the team is going to be built around Reese, who should be around for his 20-year-old season. So he's going to be that elite goalie to be a year older than all those second and third round picks I'm going to have this following draft, and then probably Daly will be the stud OA forward I'll be able to bring back with that goalie that year, because he's another guy who will definitely be back as an OA. He's a small non-NHL prospect, but I really like his skill set. He's a really good center with 13 faceoffs and has some cool abilities. Like his positioning on defense is pretty good. He's got good acceleration. I like his game a lot for some reason. So he's another guy. I think he'll be this. Hopefully we can bring back those three: him, Wilder, and the goalie. If Wilmer is too good and gets drafted in the NHL, which he might, probably not. He's not a great skater. Then we could probably bring back that defenseman for that year. But looking way ahead now, we're talking about like the 16-year-olds now that would be back as OAs in 4 years. That's a long ways away, so a lot changes and stuff doesn't usually go according to the plan. So for now, that's kind of like the general outline plan is to pretty much in summary, next year have almost all 19-year-olds and have all those 16-year-olds in junior A for a year. And then hopefully at the deadline, be able to trade a bunch of those, my best players, Dodson and Miranda, for probably a top level 16-year-old to go along with all those young guys. Get like that high end forward. And then if we don't get one in the draft, and maybe get another goalie, so we'll have like two really good goalies to rotate, Reese and like another guy in the second round or something that's a year younger. And then, yeah, but next year I think it'll still be kind of a cool year because even though we're kind of all in on the future and kind of we still kept around all those 18-year-olds. So the whole team kind of was like 19 next year, just setting up in their last seasons for that future team. So like that whole right side defense will have Ballston at 19, Paquette at 19, Shepard at 19. His birthday's pretty soon here. So all three of those guys are 17 right now. Sorry, 18 right now. So those guys will all be 19-year-old, really solid next season. And then the guy I got back in the trade will be 19, and he's really solid. That was the guy I got back from Owen Sound. And then Stewart will be back as no way next season, be like that really good offensive left defenseman. And then Bailey will be 17. So the whole defense next year. And then Rusk is actually really solid too. He's my second round pick, if you remember that from 2 years ago. So that whole defense will be solid next year. The three 19-year-olds on the right side, and then the OA and the couple 17, 18-year-olds on the left side. And then Duquette will be back at 19, and we'll have all those forwards that'll be 19 next season. If you can look, all these 18-year-olds, we got like every single one of those guys from here to here is 18. So like the four centers will all be 19 next year. Really solid. I really like Holloway. He was like a 6th-round pick. Developed very nicely. A really good skater. High potential when it comes because his like speed and stuff, in my opinion. So this guy has developed really nice. Already a 12 rated in his highest category. So yeah, next season will be pretty cool. About a bunch of 19-year-olds. This season, I'm not too worried about it, but weirdly enough, we're still really good just because the division's really bad this year. So in hindsight, being 2020, we probably shouldn't have traded all those guys this year, but it was just the way it went. Like last year, we were way better. We had Brenneman, all those like 19 rated guys like Bear, Brenneman, Kozlovsky, just the absolute mega team. Went all in. We were disappointed in the playoffs. Coming back with a bunch of, and like the other thing is we had a bunch of really high rated guys, those guys we traded, but none of them were like elite scorers. So it was like Wall and Zamparo, the center and the right winger, were both like 15, 16 rated, but they were both like 4 shooting range. So they were both like really just like really all around solid players, good offensively, defensive, and skaters, but they weren't like elite goal scorers. So we didn't have that like absolute stud, like 50 goal potential guy. And just the way the team was designed, it was like, just like, yeah, we didn't have those top notch guys for those categories, like the scores. And just the way it like kind of was, I just always kept going out in the second round and seemed like we had too much depth and too many guys that were too similar. I'd rather have like really high end guys with the top 6 and then like some young guys for the bottom 2 lines, but we just kept drafting so well for so many years. We just had so many guys stuck in the system that were like 18 in junior A. They were way too good, like all these guys. So I really wanted to just kind of open up spots for them and trade and get a bunch of high draft picks and really like get that elite team in like 3-4 years from now with all those 16-year-olds. So it's just kind of the way the cookie crumbled. I decided that was kind of the way to go. But like I said, in hindsight, if we would have known how bad the division was this year, like North Bay isn't even that good. Like they have a 3 rate on the second line defense, and they have all these like 8s and stuff. Like my team was just as good as this. Like I would have had Wall and Zamparo and stuff, but way better defense. So I actually would have been better in this like 35 and 7 team. And then they're way better than anyone else in the league. Like I'm actually just as good as the second place team, and I'm kind of like tanking almost. So it's just a year where I did not. You just can't really predict it. Kingston's won 11 in a row. They actually look like a pretty nice team. They got, but yeah, again, see like look how bad the division is. This team's all like 6s, and they have a bunch of good right wingers. Weirdly enough, but they have a 10 rated and like 14 rated D. But it's just a really bad year in the North, and so in the Eastern Conference. Sorry. So I could have easily probably been like 35 and 7 right now too if I wouldn't have made all those trades. But I just didn't feel like I was that elite. Like if you look at those, West is actually really good this year. It's just kind of the way it swings back to forth. But Owen Sound should be in the final against a Sting, and they should pretty easily handle the team, whatever team comes from the East, even though North Bay is pretty solid. So it's just a year I probably could have actually made it out of the second round, surprisingly enough. But I just the way it went, I couldn't really predict that. So I think this year I'd probably still be able to win that first round playoff series against a bad team, but gonna again like usual be tough getting out of the second round. I still got a really solid top 2 lines though, with all double digit guys and some really good defenders. But yeah, so I think the focus is going to be kind of on the future though. I'm really excited to make an episode. If I get out of the second round, I'll make a playoff episode. But if not, I'll probably make an episode when the draft comes and show you the future team. I ended up making Miranda captain. I don't know if I mentioned that once because I traded my captain. I thought Miranda would be a good guy for that because he's been around a long time and always been healthy and had 11 leadership. So it's a guy I thought was good for that role. One more thing I'll mention is I looked back at the history, which is kind of cool. The big 3 are all in playing in the AHL. If you look at, he's actually Kozlovsky's over a point a game in the AHL, which is really cool. So he wasn't drafted, and then also he's 20-year-old a point a game in the AHL, so it's just showing he really should have been drafted. Bear is at 22 points in 43 games. He's another AHL guy. He's a really solid rated guy. And then Brenneman is having a good season too. He's played all over. He was in the AHL for a bit, for 3 or 4 games, learned left wing a little bit, and now he's playing the AHL. He's got 9 goals in 11 games, so he should be an NHL regular as early as next year, probably. But another guy who's just elite. And so I was right about those guys. They were AHL guys, so they wouldn't. So my original plan was to have those guys back as OAs this year, but I figured it'd be unrealistic because they're too good. So I was right on that, and they did end up making the AHL. So glad I didn't plan to have them back. So yeah, that's how the year went, and I'm really excited to go into the future. I actually have another OA spot open. Sorry, foreign spot open too. So should be able to get a good guy in the CHL import. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that draft, and we'll make an episode on that. And that was just kind of a quick catch up in the whole season here. The one thing I probably didn't mention, in case you guys are curious, is I didn't talk about the points at all this year. Miranda's leading the team, point a game, and then again, I traded most of those first line guys halfway through the year, so the points are a little bit lower than they would be. That Swedish center was actually at like 71 points, so he was like lapping everybody. But yeah, McLeod, if you can, as you can see, is a really good defensive player, and that's why his plus minus is probably so good. He's at 29 points, only 5 goals, but 24 assists, and just has a really sweet defense rating. So I'm really in love with that style of game. An elite shutdown defender. That's a really good skater. So next year he'll probably be like the first penalty kill guy in the 3v5 and the 4v5. And just be a really sweet second line guy, and have Miranda as the first line right winger. So I really like those 2 right wingers, especially. They're probably like my 2 favorite players on the team. So I think really next year we can have a really solid team. Actually have a chance to go pretty far in the playoffs, even though the heart of the team is going to be that future. Anyways, that's it. This episode went pretty long, but I had a lot to talk about. See ya.